This episode will be completely taken out of context. Welcome to the Fact Check This podcast.
All right, Fact Check This daily, and today we're going to talk about France. Who cares about France, right? Well, turns out we should probably be caring about France. We should be caring about France and South Korea and some other things that are going on in the world. The brief thing on South Korea, because I posted a bit about it on Facebook yesterday, but I'm not going to get super in depth with it because it's still kind of playing out. But the South Korean president declared martial law for a short period of time yesterday. He has been under fire effectively since he came into office. The progressive parliament does not like a conservative president and attempted to impeach him basically from straight from the jump because of fascism and everything else, taking a page straight out of the American Congress's playbook from Trump's first presidency in 2016. And so the president of South Korea enacted martial law and then revoked it several hours later, and it's a unfolding scene there. So I'll follow back up on that as more of that plays out, and I kind of have a better idea of what's going on with it. France is also one of those things that is currently in the process of playing out and seeing what direction things are going to go. So something that was really interesting, and I mentioned this in the South Korea post on Facebook. A couple of years ago, Macron was up for re-election, and his primary opponent, Marine Le Pen, looked to be a pretty solid lock to just rout Macron. And then he ended up winning very suspiciously and by a very narrow margin. And nothing was really said of it. It was just kind of got brushed under the rug. And then Macron actually tried to resign, and his resignation got rejected, and he was more or less told, like, tough shit, you don't get to do that. Like, you're going to continue to do this by like the NATO and United Nations, the EU like leadership basically was like, no, you're going to do this. So Macron got saddled with being the president, even though he probably lost. Not saying he did lose, just saying it didn't look real, or it looked kind of suspicious. And then he attempted to resign, and his resignation was rejected. So anyway, since then, France has continued to. So I don't know if everybody remembers the yellow vest protests and stuff. This kind of stuff has been going on for a while. The French government keeps pushing more and more policy towards very similar to German, European, or German, England, English, and American governments, pushing more and more policies of spend. A lot of money being earmarked for Ukraine and what's going on in Ukraine. A lot of money being earmarked towards immigrants and bringing in immigrants and doing all of the things to house the immigrants, and largely ignoring the actual populace of the country, and adding more taxes and adding more regulations and adding more things on that make it more and more difficult for the population of said countries. So what we have coming up today is, well, I guess Monday, actually. So on Friday, Marine Le Pen, who is the head of the opposition party in Parliament, gave the new French prime minister the edict that either you get a budget that we can all agree to that doesn't completely screw our citizens over, and that actually addresses the things that are important and need to be addressed in the country. Either you can get on board with putting together a budget that we can agree to, or we're going to shut this whole thing down and we're going to take it to a vote of no confidence on Monday. So Monday came and went. The PM has not gotten together a budget that they can agree to. And as of yesterday, the talks were that today they will be taking it to a no confidence vote. It's expected to happen like literally any hour. But we're gonna look at a couple articles and go through this stuff real quickly. So France's government looks to be on the brink of collapse. What's next? And this is from the Associated Press. France's minority government appeared to be in its final hours Tuesday as opposition lawmakers from the left and the far right vowed to topple Prime Minister Michel Barnier's cabinet. A no-confidence vote is scheduled Wednesday in Parliament in the wake of a divisive budget debate, with a strong chance of being successful. If the motion passes, Barnier's cabinet would be the shortest-lived government in France's modern history, marking an unprecedented period of political instability. President Emmanuel Macron would be in charge of appointing a new prime minister. Macron appointed Michel Barnier to prime minister something like 50 days ago because the previous prime minister resigned because he saw the writing on the wall with a lot of this stuff that's coming up. In fact, interestingly enough, he resigned or turned in his resignation, and Macron rejected it. And then he was like, tough shit. Like, you don't get to reject my resignation. I fucking quit. And so he quit anyway. And then Macron had to name a new prime minister, where he picked this Michel Barnier. Barnier had attempted to run for president a couple years ago when Macron won again, and he got straight boat raced. Like, he didn't even stand a chance in the early what would be the equivalent of American primaries. Like, he did terribly in the primaries. He's a very far left type of politician. He got boat raced early on, and then disappeared from the political spotlight for the past couple years until being named as the new prime minister by President Macron. So following the June-July parliamentary elections in the National Assembly, France's powerful lower house of parliament is divided into three major blocks: a left-wing coalition known as the New Popular Front, Macron's centrist allies, and the far-right National Party or National Rally Party. None won an outright majority. In September, Macron asked Barnier, a conservative, to form a government. It's funny that the AP considers Barnier a conservative when he is extremely left-wing by all accounts of his political platforms and the things that he ran for president on a couple years ago. Anyways, to form a government dominated by Republicans and centrists, implicitly relying on the far right's goodwill to be able to stay in power. However, far right leader Marine Le Pen now says her party will vote for bringing the government down, accusing Barnier of ignoring her demands. And if you've seen and if you've followed any of the stuff, he has objectively ignored her demands. The right-wing party in Parliament has requested a number of things to relieve tax pressures on the citizens, and instead, this guy pushed through all of the things that they asked. Like, they asked for him to remove certain things, they asked for him to make compromises on other things, and he was just pushed through everything that they were asking him to dial back on without a vote. Just, he said, we're going to do it. So meanwhile, the left-wing coalition denounces an austerity budget and criticizes the absence of dialogue and disregard for parliamentary work. The National Assembly said the no-confidence motion requires a majority of the votes to pass, or at least 288 of 574 lawmakers currently in office. Altogether, the left and far right count for over 330 lawmakers, yet some may abstain from voting. What if the government falls? Wednesday could see the first no-confidence motion succeed in over 6 decades. If the government falls, Macron could ask outgoing ministers to handle current affairs pending the appointment of a new prime minister. The parliament's fractured composition would remain the same. No new legislative elections can be held before July, because under the French Constitution, the National Assembly must remain in place for a minimum of 1 year. No favorite figure to replace Barnier has emerged yet. Macron could pick a politician from his centrist alliance, French media report. The new Popular Front asks for a left-wing cabinet to be appointed instead. Some opposition lawmakers are calling for Macron to resign, but the French president has previously ruled out that option. France is at no risk of a government shutdown that in the United States would disrupt many services and squeeze federal employees. An outgoing government could present a special law to levy taxes from January 1st based on this year's rules. It would also be able to decide on renewing spending by decree in order to pay civil servants, pensions, and other key government expenses. However, this would suspend any potential tax hike, like one initially expected on big companies, and freeze any new spending. In particular, an additional 3.3 billion euro, or $3.5 billion, package for the French military was planned as the country supports Ukraine in its war against Russia. Later, a new government could present its own budget proposals at Parliament. In a last-ditch effort to save his government, Barnier warned of a big storm and very serious turbulence in the financial markets. France is under pressure from the European Union's executive body to reduce its colossal debt. The country's deficit is estimated to reach 6% of gross domestic product this year, and analysts say it could rise to 7% next year without drastic adjustments. The political instability could push up French interest rates, digging the debt even further. In addition, without a clear parliamentary majority, no major reform appears within the reach of a new government. So basically, France is kind of sitting on fucked. They really need to cut spending, but they're not willing to cut spending. They probably need to raise, they really need to cut spending, but the left and the centrists are not willing to cut any spending. They probably need to also implement some level of tax hikes, but their taxes are already so fucking insanely high because of everything else that they've done that the right is opposing all of the tax hikes without there being some serious government spending cuts. So they're stuck in a similar position as what, kind of what the U.S. is. They really need to cut spending. They're not going to do that. The left and centrists would rather increase taxes, but they're already like we talked about the yellow vest protests and stuff like that have gone on. Like they're already taxing their people insanely anyway. So the right is not going to. While the right doesn't have the outright majority, they have enough of it that they can keep anything from happening. So the whole thing is about to go just belly up. If you want to, and it talked about the markets and stuff. If you want to look at an article that gets more into the markets and the market response to what's going on in France and how the market will likely to respond, I've got a link to a Zero Hedge article that I'll include in the comments everywhere for this. You can check that out. I'm not going to go through all of it because it's more technical stuff. So if you are interested in the market side of it, feel free to check that out. And then here, just to kind of wrap it up, because we do have the no confidence vote is coming today. So we'll know how that shakes out before the end of the day. France's far-right and left-wing forces are expected to join together Wednesday to oust Prime Minister Michel Barnier's government in a historic no-confidence vote prompted by budget disputes. If the motion succeeds, it would mark the first time French government has been toppled this way in more than 60 years. President Emmanuel Macron insisted he will serve the rest of his term until 2027, despite growing opposition calls for his departure amid the turmoil. However, Macron will need to appoint a new prime minister for the second time this year, further reshaping France's political balance after his party's losses in July's legislative elections. The political drama comes as Macron, currently on a presidential visit to Saudi Arabia, dismissed the threat of government collapse, according to French media reports Tuesday, saying discussions about his potential removal from office were make-believe politics. "I'm here because I've been elected twice by the French people," Macron said. He was also reported as saying, "We must not scare people with such things. We have a strong economy." No, you don't. And this Macron saying we have a strong economy is on par with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris talking about how strong the American economy is. The people actually know better. That's why the people That's why Macron's party is no longer the majority party and lost control of parliament, because they keep saying, "Oh yeah, we're doing great, economy's good," except that literally everybody who actually lives in the economy every single day knows that that's bullshit, and it's not. The no confidence motion rose from a fierce opposition to Barnier's proposed budget. The National Assembly, France's lower house of parliament, is deeply fractured with no single party holding a majority. It comprises three major blocs: Macron's centrist allies, the left-wing coalition New Popular Front, and the right-wing, the far-right National Rally. Both opposition blocs, typically at odds, are uniting against Barnier, accusing him of imposing austerity measures and failing to address citizens' needs. So the left and the right are both arguing against Barnier for different reasons, but they both equally hate him. So they've created this like shitstorm for themselves of this dude did not do what either side wanted, so now both sides hate him. And the centrists aren't really like they're centrists, so they're, you know, they sit on the fence and don't have a strong opinion about anything. So like dude's fucked all the way around. On Tuesday morning, National Rally leader Jordan Bardella, whose party's goodwill was crucial to keeping Barnier in power, confirmed support for the motion, calling the budget flawed and harmful to the French people. Left-wing leaders have echoed similar criticisms, demanding more robust social spending. See, the right wants less taxes and less spending. The left wants more taxes and more spending. And Barnier is pushing through stuff that doesn't really appease to either side. So there you have it. The National Assembly said the no confidence vote requires at least 288 of 574 votes to pass. The far left and far right account for over 330 lawmakers. Yet some may abstain from voting, as we've said earlier. If Barnier's government falls, Macron must appoint a new prime minister, but the fragmented parliament remains unchanged. No new legislative elections can be held until at least July, creating a potential stalemate for policymakers. While France is not at risk of, and we've already talked about that, France is under pressure from the European Union to reduce its colossal debt. The political instability could push up French interest rates, digging the debt even further. So a lot of interesting craziness coming out of this. It'll be kind of wild to see how this goes forward for France, especially with as fractured as their parliament is, and which effectively means that they're not going to be able to get anything done anytime soon. Excuse me. So Macron refusing to step down is he's not going to be able to do anything. He's not going to be able to do anything one way or the other. They will effectively run as is until at least July, and then you'll see like what happens. And yes, Carlos, things look great and felt clean. That none of this affects tourism. None of this is going to affect government employees doing their jobs and stuff. It's all about the status of what the government is trying to push through in terms of different bills, in terms of spending, in terms of taxing, stuff like that. And effectively, it's going to grind everything from a legislative stance to a complete halt. And how the EU will deal with that is going to be the interesting thing to see going forward. Also, like what that means for military spending going towards Ukraine, stuff like that, that could also really come into play here. And especially when you're talking about Ukraine really, if Ukraine doesn't keep getting money and weapons poured in from outside sources like France, like England, like the United States, then that war is over within a couple months. Don and I talked about that last night. So how all of this plays out going forward with we'll see how the no confidence vote goes today. And from there, things are going to get kind of wild in France. So, and people have been protesting pretty consistently in France for a while anyway about all of this stuff, about the way that France has handled their excessive spending, excessive taxation, all that stuff. So lots to pay attention to. Interesting times that we're living in. I will be back tomorrow. We're going to talk about the seasonal flu and some of those things that people get for that. But that'll be tomorrow. Until then, have a good one. Later.